This might be for life. Yeah. This might be for life. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Yeah, this might be for life.
Hey, Spud Bees. Good morning. 10 in the morning, so some of you are getting out of bed and some of you probably haven't had a sleep. And I'm sorry for the Americans, but here we are, because Mick Doohan, our guest, VIP guest, is in Australia. He's actually flying back to Europe because his son's in the F3. Is that right, Mick? Next week, he's racing. But Mick Doohan, the most famous superbike rider in the history of the world, has broken every bone in his body twice. And he might actually take his shirt off and show us later. And Dr. Chris Leatt, who's South African, he's one of us, actually up the road here in Durbanville, I think at home or in his office, who I know you think he's a very famous athlete and rider, but actually he graduated in neuroscience from the University of Cape Town and has built a medical technology business that's fascinating in its own right. So you'll hear about that today. And Mick's going to take us for a walk around his studio as well. So this is a very special day. Mick, welcome. You're going to click your mic on again and say hi. This is the Smutby crowd.
Hello, Smutby crowd, and Rob, Chris, pleasure to be here. And Mick, by the way, I haven't quite broken every bone in my body, and twice, but I did my best job at trying to make that happen. And yeah, MotoGP, or it was 500cc back then, but now it's MotoGP. So Superbike is another thing, as Chris is probably aware. But just that anyone is I hate to correct you there, Rob, but just putting you in the right stuff that I did.
It was just a test to see if you were listening to what I said. And Mick, where are you at the moment?
Get the audio back on. I'm actually here in my house in Australia. When the COVID kicked in March, I was down here. I'm on the board of the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, so we promote the Formula One and MotoGP in Australia. And so when that was cancelled and then Bahrain was cancelled, I brought my son back, who you're speaking about, and we've been locked down here essentially since then. So not a bad place to be, and but time to get moving. On the Gold Coast, surface paradise essentially.
Are you on the beach?
Sorry?
Are you on the beach?
I'm on the water here. No, so I'm in the inland waterways. So I look over the bay. So it's not too bad. I'm in 45 acres here, so it's quite good.
And do you have any fast boats?
Got enough room to isolate.
Do you have any fast boats?
Nothing really. No, a couple of jet skis. I have had the fast boats. We've got a go-kart track on the property, so that's some fun, and all the other toys would go with it. So, I was up north earlier today having a look at some other business opportunities and via helicopter. So thankfully we're in the right spot of the world to be able to do all that without too many restrictions. And I'm pretty sure it's the same down in SA. I think it's pretty free with all those type of movements.
We've had one of the hardest lockdowns in the world. And yesterday was an important day because it was day 69. Of lockdown, so everyone celebrated in a traditional way. You know what I mean? These two, just like this.
Wonderful. But
yeah,
Chris, the restrictions here have been easy enough. Thankfully, Australia hasn't been too badly affected by it all. I think there's only 2 or 3 active cases in my state, in the state of Queensland. But even Australia hasn't got. I think there's roughly 200 active cases of that.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, Sweden and Australia have been 2 of the most, in my view, sensible countries, and yet everybody else has screwed up their economies in the process. But I want to introduce Dr. Chris Leatt. Chris, you're a Durbanville boy, is that right?
I'm at home in Stellenbosch at the moment on the farm, so our office is in Durbanville. But given this whole lockdown thing, I haven't been to the office for a bit. Once again, having space and being on a farm, it's not a bad place to be for a lockdown.
So tell us about your real life. I'll let you choose which of those 2 it is.
My real life. Well, I mean, a bit of history. First of all, I studied medicine in at UCT, and then I got kind of halfway through specializing in neurosurgery, and this whole event happened that changed my life in terms of a neck injury, and I left medicine completely and started a business. So I never finished specializing and went into business, and that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Yeah, so I mean, I can give you a bit of background to that journey. So interesting enough, I was kind of post call and rather tired, and my 4-year-old son and I went to an enduro event, and I used to not anywhere near Mick's level of racing, but I used to compete in the regional championships here. Battle of the Twins on a BMW 800, and I used to race super sport here in South Africa on the 600. But I used to ride enduro just to keep fit, and because I was so tired post call, my son and I just went to watch, and one of the riders came down a mountain close to Cape Town where this event was, and said this guy Alan Selby had fallen off and wasn't looking in a good way. So Matthew and I went up with the paramedic, tried to resuscitate Alan for half an hour, and I thought he'd had a neck injury, and it turned out that that's what led to his death, and it really moved me in a big way. More so, I think, because my son, who was 4 years old at the time, 2 weeks prior to this, had ridden a motorbike for the first time. I mean, I've been mad about motorcycles my whole life, but he'd ridden a little PB50 and, was really enthusiastic about it. And then this happened, and I just said to him, I'm not going to let you ride until I figure this out. I mean, I can't with good conscience let you break your neck as well. And that's what started the whole journey for me. Well, that is a whole long journey. So I starting a new business, you wear numerous different hats, and thankfully now I have a very good CEO. So I'm more concerned with R&D and new product development than I am with running the business. So my quality of life has improved a little bit since those manic days of starting a business. And we started doing neck braces, and now we do all sorts of other safety apparel, mostly for off-road sports, motorcycle and bicycle, and we're sort of a head-to-toe brand now. We used to be very technical, and now hopefully we technical and cool.
And Mick, have you heard of Chris's business, or do you know of it?
Yeah, of course. It's more through the neck braces, which became quite popular. What would that be, Chris? The mid 2000s, perhaps, as you say, somewhere around there, early part of this, the past decade. And whether they be go-karting, I think there was some big kids using them go-karting as well, and then the motocross more so. Road racing, I don't think they were that popular. Maybe there was 1 or 2 people running them, but it's I don't think the device was built for that, was it, Chris?
No, it wasn't. In fact, it's quite interesting that speed is protective to your neck. So it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but if you're traveling at high speed, you generally slide. Whereas if you're in motocross, the worst thing you can do for your neck is land in soft sand from a height at relatively low speed. So there's a sustained loading on your neck, and that's what causes injuries. But that's why you see so few neck injuries in MotoGP and World Superbike.
It's a sudden stop. It's a sudden stop that's the issue. But you hurt yourself if you're true. You hurt yourself more on the slow speed crashes than you do on the high speed generally, unless you hit something.
Yeah, a high side or something.
Mick, have you counted how many times you've wiped out? Can you guess?
From a young age, because I did the motocross, I rode what we call short circuit or flat track out here, and then but in the World Championship stuff, as they now call MotoGP, I only crashed about 28 times, but I didn't crash that often in comparison to what they do today. But when I did, I made sure I did it properly. So I would go a season. I think the best I did was about 18 months without a crash. But unfortunately, I did a job on myself twice, and I almost lost my leg in '92 took me about 18 months really to recover from that. And then I had a good string of, I was leading the World Championship when that happened. And then it took me about 18 months, as I say, to get over. And then I had a string of 5 championships in a row. And then I had another crash. I crashed at about 210 kilometres an hour and feet first into the sand, as you say. So a sudden stop, a lot of sudden sort of inertia stopping, blew one leg apart, blew all the ligaments in another, threw me into a fence. And then I tried to put myself back together a bit too quickly. So it was going to be another 18 months to get back after some medical, new medical type theories they had, I guess it's the best way to put it, in Stanford. And I went out to the US. I was in southern Spain, and it didn't work. So then my leg collapsed again, and then I just put up the white flag. I said, you know what, I've had a good run. And my Band-Aid, my first aid box is running out of Band-Aids. I'm done. So,
but you know, Mick,
coming over the big with Rob.
I know you turned 75 yesterday, so happy birthday.
That's all right. I'm still trying to catch you, so that's okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot. No, 55 or something, is that about right? Just nod. You don't have to.
Oh, sorry. Yes, actually, you're true. Yes, you're correct. Yesterday was my 55th birthday. Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Can't believe you made it this far.
Exactly.
Mick, I've always wanted to put you on the spot now. Are you ready for this one? And I know the answer, so I want to check if you're going to be honest. Have you ever been to South Africa? And when you did come, what happened?
Well, I've been there a few times. I'm still owed appearance money for an event I went to in 1987 with a dodgy South African. I'm still waiting for the check. But I guess the last time I was there was about 2 years ago now, I guess. And I showed up to show an aircraft. I went down to represent an aircraft for sale. And I was meant to meet an Indian-Australian fellow to come out to meet. And we'd had a wonderful barbecue, I believe, at your place. So I wasn't too disappointed when he didn't show up. But yes, I went out to the airport, and here the guy wanted to do a WhatsApp call on me because he hadn't left Australia or wherever he was. But yes, that was a big disappointment. Then, in fact, I came back again about, was it 2 or 3 months later, and he did the same thing, a no-show. So they were the last times I was coming. I was looking forward to getting down to your, what was your 80th, I think, a month or two back.
Like that. Yeah, we are going to do it, I promise you. But happy birthday, Mick. It's great. And
No,
Chris,
thanks. Yeah.
Chris, are you the young one of the three here?
At a mere 52, yeah, I'm the young one.
Yes, I'm the old one.
I'm not often called young at 52, but there we go.
So, guys, what question would you like to ask each other? So, Chris, you go first. You got to ask Mick a question. Come on.
I want to know about your left-hand thumb rear braking. That's for me quite an interesting innovation, and helped you carry on riding after your injury.
Yeah, look, I think, where was I? South Africa, 92 as well, I think, in Kyalami. The first race back from almost losing my leg in 92 was in Brazil, and I couldn't use the rear brake. My right ankle is now functionally fused, but as you know, the foot brake's there, and the 2 strokes don't have any engine braking whatsoever. So even on the 4 strokes, I use the rear brake a little bit now with the thumb, but essentially I just needed some stability for the braking. And in South Africa, again, I realized that without the rear brake, and especially in the wet, because I think some of the practice sessions were in the wet, I needed to think of a way I could adapt a rear brake to use with my hand or with my knee or something. So it took me the off season to really come up with it, and I put a lever next to the clutch lever, because the clutch lever on the 2 strokes, there was no traction control back then. So the easiest way to stop the rear wheel spinning was disengage the clutch, which would stop the spin straight away, because once it starts spinning, you can't shut it down with the throttle. And I soon realised that I couldn't actually use 2 fingers independently. So then as I'm going around the racetrack, I'm going, well, how hard am I really holding on to this motorcycle? And you recognise that you're not really hanging onto it that hard anyway. And you tell yourself, actually, at most racetracks, even if it's a 2-minute lap time, you're only actually sitting on the seat for about 8 seconds. You're crawling all over the bike, you're steering it with your legs. And so you tell yourself to actually loosen up the grip. And, as I'm going around turns, I'm like, well, how hard am I really hanging on to it? And I took my thumb off on my left hand. I'm thinking about a jet ski or an ATV, quad bike or something. And I thought, well, perhaps I can get Honda to build because that thing's not working, the other little lever. So I came in after the race and I said, can you guys build a thumb brake? And they adapted one. And then the bike I'm sitting on here at the moment has one of the original ones on it, which everything was billet, everything, the master cylinder, the whole lot was made by Honda Racing Corporation. And it was a nightmare, to be honest. But the first time I used it, I got back on the podium, even with my leg was still, it had a malunion or was still essentially broken. So I was steering the bike essentially with my arms and one leg, which wasn't good. But at least I had a rear brake. And that was the start of it. Now, Brembo themselves actually make it as a production item. And I think anyone can buy it. But a lot of the MotoGP guys, a lot of the superbike riders and a lot of different road race formats now adapt it because they have trouble getting their right foot out of the way on right-hand turns.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Mick,
like,
Chris, you got to ask Chris a question.
can we just finish the break? I mean, obviously, you ride inverted gears. You're changing up by hitting the gear lever down, and I guess that's why the guys can't brake when they're so low to the ground, and that's why they converted. Because I was going to ask you if anybody else is riding it. You've just answered that. It's quite interesting.
There's still a few out there today, in fact, on the MotoGP grid. But yeah, I didn't have a problem getting my foot out of the way because, if that's a footrest there, I would put my foot up like that and use the rear brake, like this. But yeah, equally, you're exactly right. There was still a few guys, Kevin Schwantz in the past, I'm not sure today, but who would run traditional race gear shift pattern, 1 down and 5 up. It was very foreign for me to when I arrived at Yamaha, they told me I had to run the other way. It doesn't take you long to adapt to it, but exactly like when you're sitting up to brake, it's also much easier to count how many gears you're going back through. But on long turns, on some turns where you're going through them at 150 to 250 kilometers an hour, to lift the bike up to get your foot underneath it to change your gear is hard. So you just stand on it. And even if the footrest, even if the gear lever is almost grinding out, you've still got enough pressure to change the gear. So it's equally the other way, which is very unusual, where you're going into a turn where you need to get your foot underneath it to backshift it. But that's why the gears are reversed on a road bike and a road racing bike.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, but if I can, Leatt. I honestly didn't know where Leatt come from when I first had seen it. I didn't know whether it was just a company name or whatever. Clearly it is, but I didn't know there was an actual Mr. Leatt behind it or Dr. Leatt. But the road racing side of things, like Alpine Stars, who I have a great association with, they've taken the safety devices with the airbags and whatever else. You haven't decided to go down that path. You've just stayed with the dirt bikes and bicycles, as you say. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, we kind of see our business as a hill where we do premium products for a kind of a narrow market first, and then we develop products for a broader market afterwards. And we started off in motocross, and David Bailey. From the US, the motocross rider in the 80s who got paralyzed, really popularized the brace in the USA, and that's where it took off in motocross. And now with bicycles becoming and mountain bikes becoming so popular, it was a sort of a natural progression for us. In terms of road racing, obviously we started with the neck brace and recognized early that speed is protective for the neck in terms of the incidence of neck injuries in high-speed sports versus motocross and downhill. So it's the risk of a neck injury in high speed sports like MotoGP is less than 1%, whereas it's between 5 and 7% in motocross and downhill racing. So that was our sort of natural habitat, and we've kind of remained there. Is in sort of relative to your sport, low velocity racing. Airbags are an intriguing concept and design, and they've been around for a long time, and they've been adapted now with very clever algorithms, because the two essential problems with airbags. The one is, when do you make it go off? You clearly don't want it to go off at the wrong time, and you want it to go off at just the right time. One of the barriers to entry, therefore, was to create this trigger. I mean, if you strap yourself onto a motorcycle with just a physical strap, as soon as you leave the motorcycle, it deploys the airbag. That's the easiest way to get them to deploy. But now, of course, there's some very complicated algorithms and Dainese and Alpine Stars that use these systems. Use accelerometers, gyroscopes, GPS tracking, all sorts of things to determine, whether it should deploy or not, and then an algorithm. So it's not really our world in terms of the products that we produce. The second issue with airbags, and it's sort of led us to steer clear of them, in part, is that when an airbag deploys, it deploys once for a big impact. And what it might actually do, and unfortunately there's very little data published by the FIM in this regard, is it actually changes your trajectory on the ground. So you go from in very crude terms, a slim rider sliding down the track to somebody who's slightly bigger, who has a deployed airbag. And if you start tumbling, you're more likely to get injured than if you were just sliding. So I haven't seen compelling data to tell me that that this is the answer, although that data might exist. I just am not privy to it. And then in terms of my name, the name Leatt, it's an old Gaelic name. It's our surname. There are very few of us in South Africa who have this surname, and it was a holding pattern for the business. I don't know what to call it, so we just call it the Leatt race, and then it stuck. Now we can't undo it. So there we go.
Well, the Leatt, I say Leatt. I was, everyone I know refers to it as Leatt, but we need the proper pronunciation down here. But
it's quite Leatt, but and the Americans would call it Leatt, and all sorts of things.
Yeah, well, we'll let them go with that anyway. But but no, Doohans. Well, we've got that in common as well. The Doohans. There's not too many Doohans anywhere, especially in Australia or around the place. But I see you doing helmets as well, which is good. But mainly, again, off-road helmets, yeah.
Off-road helmets. We do quite revolutionary knee braces. There's a big trend now in helmets to cater for rotational acceleration. So back in the day when the Snell, DOT, ECE, and all the standards were developed for helmets, they recognized that people get injured by decelerating rapidly. But what was missed for quite a while is the fact that rotational acceleration is actually a lot more dangerous. So if you hit an obstacle and your head rotates, and therefore your brain inside, it can be absolutely devastating to the brain. So you can suffer quite a high velocity, high G linear deceleration, but as soon as your head rotates, it can be devastating to the brain. So that's why most helmet manufacturers now are moving towards anti-rotational devices like the MIP system. We've combined anti-rotation and very low speed damping in something called our turbines inside the helmet to try and not only mitigate against rotational acceleration, but also low speed impact that causes concussion. So repeated, relatively low velocity hits to the head can cause concussion and concussion syndrome and keep you out of the sport for a long time. So we've got that sort of dual purpose turbine in our helmets. But we've also developed some fascinating other products, knee braces with no inside hinge that works very biomechanically aligned with the knee but allows you to grip the motorcycle. So the motocross riders, that wear knee braces have to change their riding style because you've got a joint between yourself and the petrol tank or the seat. So we've got a knee brace without. We've got clever goggles, clever boots, lots of things now that we've developed over time. So sort of the philosophy in our company is that we don't want to be a Me Too brand. We want to innovate as much as possible. And if we want to go into helmets or boots or goggles, for example, we look at what we would ultimately like to achieve and not what the rest of the market is doing, and then develop the products like that.
Oh, brilliant. No, good.
Mick, would you do us a little favor and take your camera on a little walk around behind you and show some of the people
I can do that for you, Rob. I can do that for you, Rob. This is a little, when I built this house, must be about 16, 18 years ago now, I decided, thankfully with a motorcycle, unlike Formula One cars, you can actually build a little room and hide it away from the rest of the house. So I created a little museum. I got some corners named after me here. Got a couple of keys to the city, would unlock nothing. And every time I go to the mayor's office, But each one of these bikes here, that was the one I was sitting on, I think, and I was saying this one here was the first World Championship. And then one from each year, and a few different awards over the time. Some friends' helmets, Michael Schumacher's helmet here, and a full set of riding gear. But this one here, you can see. I don't know whether you can see that. Can you see a rear brake there? But and then this one's the last one here. It looks a little bit different, but. And just, this isn't all the different bits of memorabilia or trophies or whatever you want to call it. But just, I was able to sort of create a space big enough to be able to put everything into one room. And you can come in here if you want to and bring people like yourself in, even though we're doing it via web, and show you around. But a few of the little apparatuses I have on my legs over the years. There's a few other nuts and bolts around the place, but essentially just a little room to hide all the old stuff, I guess. That's about it.
That's fantastic, Mick. Thank you very much, guys. We've got a few questions down here. So firstly, Dion Borta says, "Wow, what a privilege to see this." So, Mick, thank you for doing that. But there's some questions. Michael Wall, who you kindly sorted out for some tickets a year ago in Europe, very grateful, has asked a few questions here. Hey, Mick, it's been announced that Paul Espargaro might join Red Bull Honda team if this happens. Where do you think that'd leave Mark's brother, Alex? Will it be a three-man team?
It could be. At the moment, the season hasn't started, so I would suspect you'd wait until you see how Alex Marquez goes against his brother. It's going to be a tall order for the kid to compete against his brother. His brother is extremely talented. But if he can, it's his first year into the senior category. So if he can perform, I can't see why they would put somebody else in there as well. So, two Spaniards for the, quite easily with marketing, Marquez. All you got to do is change the number. You've got a winning team. But so it's pretty easy. At the moment, I'd say it's all too much of a rumour play, and we just have to wait a little bit longer. The season starts middle of July, and I'd say it'll be a condensed season, maybe only 10 races, but it still should be an exciting season. But who knows, other than the main players, where they're going to end up.
And this one's for Chris and Mick. Your thoughts on the South African MotoGP rider, Brad Binder? Chris, you want to take a crack?
Well, I mean, it's hugely exciting for us to watch Brad and his progress and in MotoGP. And I think he left South Africa at the right time, and he got to Europe and got exposure at the right time, and it's quite interesting when he comes back home and just cleans up everything. But I mean, what a pleasure to watch, and certainly gets me in front of the TV at MotoGP time.
Yeah, look, Brad's a great young guy. You know, he's very well liked in the paddock. He's an amazing talent, and you know, given the right opportunity, I think it'd be great to see him up fighting against, you know, because he's certainly proven himself from the Red Bull rookies all the way through to where he's got to at this point in time. So, you know, it's a shame. The South Africans have always been strong on the motorcycling scene. Now the Europeans are dominating again, so it would be good to carry some more South African riders and perhaps one day get another Grand Prix back down in South Africa. But Brad's doing a great job, as I say, very well liked in the paddock and performs, you know, equally well. So, you know, I enjoy every time I catch up with him.
And this one's from Chris Gibson. The 500s and 750s in the 90s era were a handful to ride. What are your thoughts on modern day electronic rider aids, and would you have preferred riding with them?
Well, the 500s, they were just 500 cc's, and I think today, you know, the good guys could still ride. Back in those days, as I say, the clutch and your right hand and your left hand were basically the electronic controls. We had some different engine modes, and that was just for wet and so on to sort of change the ignition timing. But now the manufacturers don't actually want to risk the rider's health. You know, probably better for Chris and his business if they did, but they actually want them to be more under control. So the good riders have them turned down a lot. Most of the electronics are turned down as much as you can possibly have them turned down. But the good riders want them without the electronics. But you know, what would I prefer? I haven't really ridden these new ones in any sort of anger. So, you know, they've got quite a lot of horsepower. They're heavier, but, you know, at 300 horsepower at 150 odd kilos, you know, so there are a handful doing 350 kilometers an hour. I'd probably want as many things as I could adapt to the motorcycle to keep me safe. But you know, equally back when I was competing, they were about 210 horsepower with about 130 kilos of weight. So, you know, but a completely different engine configuration. But it wasn't something you thought about. There wasn't electronics. There wasn't this. So we just had to adapt to it. And the suspension, tyres, everything was evolving. You know, but thankfully I wasn't in the era 20 years earlier where it was really, you know, at the forefront of development in racing, and everything was breaking often. The tracks were dangerous. Thankfully, the next era, they didn't break that often. We were on fairly reasonably safe tracks. And today, now the bikes are safer, the tracks are safer, and the equipment's safer, but still motorcycling is inherently dangerous. So anything that they can do to try and limit the injuries for the rider is going to be better for the sport at the end of the day.
And Heine asks a question, thoughts on Jack Miller riding for Ducati next year? Welcome, Michael Wall. Here's Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, how's it, Mick? Hi, Chris. Hi, Rob. How's it? Thanks for having me on.
We'll just get this question, and then Michael, you're going to fire away. Jack
Yeah,
Miller.
you know, Jack's an amazing talent. He's from Australia here in North Queensland. He was with the junior team, if you'd like to say that, and you know, a few of the riders have passed through there before. And so really it's now up to what Ducati can deliver him, but he's certainly got the pace. I just think now he needs to be able to distance, because he's very quick in qualifying, very quick for a third of the race, or perhaps sometimes longer, but he loses the consistency towards the end. So if he can just gain the maturity and a bit more of a level head, perhaps he can certainly be a championship contender. He's extremely fast. He's still young, and he's now got a bit of experience. So look, it'll be great for Australia to see another champion come through. It keeps the sport here on the television, in the papers, and it keeps us having a motorcycle Grand Prix down here.
Michael, go ahead. We're going to have to wrap in 5 minutes.
How's it? Okay, so Mick, you know, a lot of people, I mean, I've raced motorbikes for most part of my life. I was also in the Super Sport Championship, much like Chris Leatt. And I just wanted to, you know, a lot of guys, you know, they don't see what happens behind the scene, or the dedication and determination in in our sort of training regimes. Tell me a little bit about how you used to prepare back in the day for your race fitness.
Yeah, I used to just go and have a beer with Rob, and we'd go out. That's yeah. Look, I think in that sort of era, that towards the end of the 80s, the fitness was starting to become a big influence on the sport, and it still does today. But by the end of my career, I was doing up to 4 hours a day, some days 2 hours with some cardio, and another 2 hours with sort of body weight training. And it's a mindset that you just want to keep going and think you think more than your competitor. But you're actually training like an Olympian. And today, all these guys are Mark Hessert, and also the Formula One guys. The amount of work they put in to drive a car, ride a motorcycle is huge, and it's a lot of commitment, a lot of time, but that's your sport. And the fitter you can be, the more focused you can be. You're not thinking about you getting tired, but it's now more muscle specific and more dedicated training, I guess, to what it was back then. We had exercise physiologists and a whole bunch of hanger-ons, I used to call them. I didn't like them, actually. I just wanted to go and do my own thing and just get fit and go racing and do things that I thought would help. And for me, it was good, but today there's a lot more sort of guidance, I guess, to these guys. But the level of fitness in motorcycle racing, especially motocross, but also now MotoGP, just because how physical they do not want to turn either way. So you steer them with your feet. And, with 300 horsepower, 150 odd kilos, they just want to be riding on one wheel. It's a unicycle, really. But yeah, the fitness level is quite high, and I was doing quite a lot. And as I say, probably more than I had to, but it was just to sort of do more than my competitor and know that I was 100% ready to go when I'd show up at the racetrack. And then I can go and have a beer with Rob.
Another one. So when you were an up and coming racer, can you tell me who were the racers or the riders that you looked up to in your era?
Well, look, I started doing dirt bikes when I was a young kid, and then road racing happened fairly quickly. So in the States, there was a bunch of Marty Smith, who sort of unfortunately just passed away in a buggy accident. We're racing with this type of FMF stuff and all this. And then road racing, Barry Sheen was very influential on my, I'd never heard of him until I'd met the guy, to be honest. And then I become seeing what he'd done, how his commitment to racing, we become good friends, and he became very influential. And then the same as Eddie Lawson, I became his teammate. But really prior to that, I didn't actually have anyone. I just knew that what I wanted to do and how I went about it. But I didn't really know many people in the road racing game. It was all in dirt bikes. So as I said, it was almost accidental that I got into road racing. And then within 2 years, essentially, I was racing in Europe on a 500cc.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. You are definitely one of my heroes, and same was Kevin Swans, looking up to you guys when I was a kid watching you guys. But tell me something, just on your injury, on your leg injury, on that 18 months off where you almost lost your leg. Can you tell us a little bit more about what was the process for your leg healing? Because I know there's an amazing story behind that, and I think it's one that most people would love to hear.
Well, it was essentially malpractice. I nearly lost my leg. It was compartment syndrome, which was well known, not to me at that point in time, but thankfully another doctor recognised what was happening, and before this doctor in Holland could amputate my leg, he medevaced myself and Kevin Schwantz out of there. Actually, took us back to Bologna, and fortunately saved my leg. And there was many times I didn't really know what was going on. Essentially, when they had a spoon to it, hopefully everyone sort of had their breakfast some time ago, and I had black skin on the base of my leg, and they started to just take it with a spoon type instrument and started digging out the flesh until the bone was exposed, metal was around the tendons, and that's when I thought, wow, this is going to be I'm not going to be back in 6 weeks, although I was back in 6 weeks, but you know, I didn't really recognize what was happening, and with that, I kept pushing myself. Once we did, we being the doctor and myself agreed that I'd do a barbaric situation, you know, and do a cross leg flap where they basically joined one leg to the other and stole some skin off the other leg, but kept it attached and the blood supply into the other leg, and for 2 weeks to just try and sort of get me back going on the bike, and couldn't actually bolt the legs together because we didn't want to put holes in the bones, so we just plastered the legs together. So, you know, looking back on that now, I wouldn't change a thing, but there must have been something. I must have hit my head at the same time when that was happening, but it was all in vain, really. I did come back, as I said earlier. I went and raced in South Africa. I was, you know, especially to today, I was a lot thinner, but then my leg didn't heal, you know, with the exposed bone and everything else. I got an infection in the bone. And by the end of 93, I rode to just keep my contract, because I used to back myself and just do a year-by-year contract. And so everyone was vying for I'd never be the same, so they were vying for my contract. So I did enough to actually convince Honda that I'll be actually okay if I can ride again. By the end of that year, I could grab my ankle and my knee and flex my leg. By the end of the year as well, I had almost a 20-degree angulation in my right leg, in the fibula, or the tibia, sorry. And then I went and I went to the Northern California, to San Francisco, and we put that one of those apparatuses I was showing you before in Ilizarov, and straighten the leg, and then compress the leg, and then started to grow the bone back to a size what was equal to the other. We did it in a very compressed time period as well, over about 3 or 4 months. It's normally over about a nine-month period. So, you know, I was fortunate to meet some crazy doctors and some special sort of trauma specialists who were committed to sort of, well, they understood what I was trying to achieve, and they thought that they could get me there. And, you know, I was fortunate to have a lot of people in my corner with that. And but as I say, the original problem with my leg started by you know, probably going to the wrong hospital, to be honest. I was in too much of a rush. I should have went, whether it even be to South Africa, I could have went to Australia, I could have went to the States, London. I decided to get it fixed as soon as possible at the little veterinarian clinic near the circuit, because there was 2 weekends off, and I thought, well, if I bolt it back together, I got 2 weekends off, I can actually race at the next event. But, you know, whereas the doctor ended up saving my leg, said, look, we can just put it in a plaster cast. It's just a spiral fracture. I won't go into how it broke. I'd essentially break my own leg trying to get out from underneath the bike. But he said, we'll be back in 6 weeks later if I just put it in a plaster cast. Well, I come back 6 weeks later in Brazil, but, you know, basically a shadow of my former self. So, you know, hopefully that was, is that the story you're sort of...
yeah, it's incredible. You know, I mean, it's modern day gladiators. The MotoGP riders are on another level. These guys are breaking collarbones on a Saturday, going for surgery on the Saturday night, and racing on Sunday. You know, so it's just amazing to hear that. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got your leg.
Mick and
I
Mike.
couldn't be without it. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Guys, unfortunately, we have to wrap now. But
Thank you very much, guys.
Two great superheroes. Mick Doohan, you're a great pal. You've got a lot of friends here in South Africa, so you've got to come back. And Chris, we're going to see you here again. Do you want to make a wrap-up comment, Chris? Anything you want to say?
Your mic's on.
Mic's off.
There we go.
But that was intelligent. I knew you.
No, just as well you didn't hear what I said. I'll talk to Mick. Yeah, it's just a privilege being on this webinar with you and seeing your bike showroom there and all those championship winning bikes, and to hear your recovery stories. It's yeah.
Well, thanks. Likewise, it's nice to finally meet the man behind the brand.
And Mick and Chris. Chris does know what a Veldskoen is. Yeah, nod your head. Mick, you're going to get both of you getting a pair of Veldschoens. It's a fantastic South African product. You wear them on your feet, and you just have to say whether you're a saint or a sinner, because that determines veldschoens.com which pair you get. So I'm a sinner trying to be a saint. How about we make both of you sinners? Because the shoelaces are much more. Is that all right?
I think we probably all fall into that same category.
All right.
Yeah. Happy with
Guys,
that.
thank you very much. See you all again soon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day. Thanks,
Thanks.
Mick. Thanks, Michael. Bye, guys.